Okay, good morning, dear students. Uh, this is a continuation of yesterday's class, and today we'll be dealing with chronic osteomyelitis. Yesterday we finished acute and subacute. Okay. So, what is chronic osteomyelitis? Chronic osteomyelitis is a severe, persistent, and sometimes incapacitating infection of the bone and bone marrow. What does this mean? Okay, so incapacitating infection means it limits your function. Okay, if you are sick, then it limits your function. You are not able to work. Okay, so work days are reduced. So it is that much dangerous. Okay, persistent, more than 6 weeks. Okay, it should be at least 6 weeks to say chronic osteomyelitis. And it is a dreaded sequel of acute heterogeneous osteomyelitis. So it limits your function. Once you have this chronic osteomyelitis, it limits your function. Okay, it may reduce your work level. Okay, so causative agents, we talked about them yesterday. The organisms are the same. Okay, except in these implants where you use the orthopedic implants, the organisms commonly found is staph epidermidis, okay, which form a biofilm and stays there. Okay, the biofilm protects them from this antibiotics. Okay, so unless you remove the implant, no matter how much antibiotics, how strong antibiotics you give, it will not work. So the predisposing factors are the same thing. Okay, the basic is immunocompromised patients, okay, and nutritionally poor patients. So in treatment of this chronic osteomyelitis patients, nutrition is also very important. Okay, if their nutrition status is poor, okay, no matter how good treatment you give, they will not cope up. Okay, they will not do well. So you have to give them good nutrition. Okay, they have to be very strong. Okay, stronger than the bacteria. So the nutrition status also has to be kept in mind, which we people do not take into consideration that much. We just do surgical treatment, then give antibiotics. But most of us even do not ask how well he's eating, what is the nutrition status. Okay, so nutrition is very important. Okay, so pathology. Okay, in any infection of bone, there is an attempt to repair the bone, but if incomplete, it results in chronic persistence of the infection. Okay, so there's always an attempt. Okay, and this repair process is good in the cancellous bone. Okay, not in the diaphysis, in the cancellous bone. If infection takes place in the metaphyseal area, which it takes more often, okay, the repair is good. Okay, it will try to get rid of the infection and then get converted into normal bone if we act early and stop the disease process from going from acute to chronic. Okay, the repair is accomplished by hyperemia of the surrounding tissue and formation of granulation tissue. So necrotic cancellous bone is readily absorbed and replaced by new bone. Okay, dead cortex is gradually absorbed and its surface is detached from the living bone to form a sequestrum, and this requires several months. Okay, so what goes on is there's an infection in the bone, the inflammatory cells come, the phagocyte activity keeps on going, okay, trying to eat away the dead bone, and also the body, what is does? The bone gets resorbed. Two processes going. One is the phagocytic process going, the other is the body trying to resorb the bone. Okay, two processes going side by side. Okay, so, and this is helped by the healthy granulation tissue which grows over the dead bone. Okay. Now, sequestrum is a piece of dead bone surrounded by the infected. This we talked yesterday. Infected granulate tissue trying to eat away the sequestrum. Okay. It appears pale, having smooth inner surface and rough outer. Okay. So when the sequestrum is complete, it lies free in the cavity and is less attacked by the granulation tissue and is absorbed more slowly. So a time will come when the sequestrum will separate from the cortex. Okay, when it is in the cortex, there's more phagocytic activity and more of the body trying to resorb the bone. But there comes a time when the sequestrum will fall from the cortex and it fall into the middle cavity. And at that time, it is absorbed very slowly, okay? But meanwhile, the surrounding living bone attempts to wall off the infection by forming a thick, dense wall, the involucrum. While in the middle cavity, though there is no granulation tissue, the normal bone will try to encase the sequestrum, okay? Will try to cover up the sequestrum, okay? And that's known as the involucrum. And involucrum is the dense sclerotic bone overlying the sequestrum. And involucrum usually has multiple openings, the cloaca, through which the exudate bone debris and sequester find the exit and pass through the sinus tract to the surface. So this we also talked yesterday. The involucrum, it encases the sequestrum, but the sequestrum, it throws up the pieces of bone, the spicules. So the involucrum, there forms a hole, which is known as the cloaca. It comes out to the cloaca, and from there towards the skin, a sinus tract forms, and from there it comes to the skin. And you can see those tiny spicules of bone, and the patient there themselves will tell, along with pus or along with seropollen discharge, they could see some whitish structure coming out from the sinus tract. So now if you look at this, this is the dead piece of bone, which is very white, okay? Involucrum also is is white than the normal bone, but here you can see some blood vessels over it, okay? So this is the sequestrum and this is the involucrum. So this is the specimen of dry bone. So look at this sequestrum. It's very white and you can see no pores, okay? This is the living bone. In living bone, previously living bone, now you can see all the pores, okay? So this is the normal bone and this is the sequestrum, which is lying in the medullary cavity. There are no pores and it is very sclerotic and white in color, okay? So there's a classification system for chronic osteomyelitis, and why this has been done is for the treatment purpose, okay? Some patients, not all patients will withstand the surgical treatment, okay? Some patients are immunocompromised, and you try to do a radical surgical debridement, taking out the bone, you will do more harm to the patient because the patient will not be able to withstand the surgery, like immunocompromised patients, like those on steroids, diabetes, having many comorbid conditions like hypertension and COPD. So you have to judge, okay? You have to treat the patient, and there are many modalities. You can just get antibiotics, just do a simple debridement, but you cannot do radical. So you have to judge whether the radical surgical debridement, removing the bone, will do more good or it will harm the patient and cause more morbidity and even may be mortality, okay? So this classification system is known as the Sydenham-Nader staging system, okay? And they are the anatomic types and physiological class of host, okay? So in anatomic type, there are 4 types, physiological 3 types. So there's a combination of 12. So 4 into 3, 12 combinations, okay? So class A denotes a normal host. So you treat, it'll act normally. Class B denotes with some systemic compromise, local compromise, or both, okay? And class C denotes the host for whom the morbidity of treatment is worse than that imposed by disease itself. So you are doing a radical operation, removing the bone, sequestrectomy, you may do more harm, okay? It will do more harm, more morbid, and even mortality, okay? So now the anatomic type. So this is the medullary type. That means the medullary cavity is infected, okay? And superficial means the cortex is infected. The medullary cavity has not been infected yet. Localized means the cortex is infected and also the medullary cavity. And diffuse is type 3 itself, but at multiple places. The cortex is infected, the medullary cavity is infected, but at multiple sites, okay? So know this classification, Sydenham-Nader staging system, okay? So this classification gives whether the patient would benefit by doing radical surgical treatment or not. Okay. So the clinical features, okay, recurrence of flares, redness, and tenderness. Okay. So this means a patient with chronic osteomyelitis, you treat him and he's okay, maybe for many years, but you do not know again where his symptom will start. Okay. Now you have treated him, he's taking good nutrition, he'll be all right maybe for 10 years. Maybe he'll come down after 15 years again with the flares and the reoccurrence of the infection. The infection which was dormant again has flared up. Okay. You cannot, many of the times you cannot completely eradicate the infection in chronic osteomyelitis. Okay. It's very difficult to treat. Okay. We had, I think last year, one patient who came after 15 years. He was okay for 15 years. Then he came back after 15 years with flares and discharge, okay, from the leg. And we gave him antibiotics for, IV antibiotics for 1.5 months. And he was okay. And we sent him home. But again, we don't know when he'll come back. Okay. The day he's not taking good nutrition, he's immunocompromised, again, the infection will restart. Okay. So the skin also will be very thickened. Okay. And there'll be sinus and there'll be discharge from the sinus. Okay. So this is also one of the patient. He has chronic osteomyelitis of the humerus. So if you look at the skin, it will be like this. Okay. It's very indurated, thickened, and you can see the sinuses. Okay. So from here, you will get the discharge. It could be seropurulent, it could be purulent, and sometimes even throwing up the spicules of bone. Okay. So in physical examination, should we focus on the integrity of the skin soft tissue, and you have to assess the bone stability. Okay. Because the bone is very weak. When they present to you, they will only come with the discharge. Okay. These patients will not have that much pain as in acute osteomyelitis. Okay. They will just come that they will say that the discharge is coming since months. Okay. And at that time, you also have to assess the bone stability, whether it has already resulted in a pathological fracture or not. Okay. And before taking up any surgical intervention, you have to do a thorough neurovascular status of the limb. You have to examine for the vascular status and the neurological status. Okay. So the diagnosis is based on clinical, laboratory, and imaging studies. But the gold standard is you take out the dead piece of bone, send it to histopathology, and they will confirm. Okay. That is the gold standard to say that is a chronic osteomyelitis. Okay. You see the sequestrum, and that's the gold standard. You have to do a histopathology. Always, when you do a surgical intervention, you take out the specimen, soft tissue also, and the bone, and you have to send to 2 places. One is for the histopathology, and one is for the microbiology. Always you have to do that. Okay. When you take out some specimen from the body, you have to send to 2 places. One is histopath, and one is the microbiology. Okay. So laboratory studies, generally non-specific, and ESR and CRP are elevated in most of the patients. Total counts may not be elevated. Okay, it's elevated only in 35% of the cases. So the imaging studies, the X-ray, sonography, CT scan, and MRI. Okay. So if you look at the X-ray, here you can see there's a very radiodense, okay, whitish structure, and it is lying free in the medullary cavity. This is the sequestrum. Okay, you will see lying free in the medullary cavity. And look at this. Here there's a medullary cavity. Here we don't see any. It's all filled up with this dead bone. Okay, sclerotic bone. Here also you cannot see the medullary cavity. Okay, and in this here, you look at this. There's a small hole here. This is known as the cloaca. Through this, the bone spicules are thrown up. Okay, the involucrum. Involucrum is very difficult to appreciate on the X-rays. Here, even though it is given, it is difficult to appreciate. Okay, what you can appreciate is sequestrum, and cloaca you can appreciate very well. And sequestrum is actually over the involucrum is over the sequestrum. So sequestrum is already dense white, So inverted also just could be a layer over that, okay? But it's very difficult to make out in the X-ray. If you just see the sequestrum, that's enough, okay, for your diagnosis with the history, okay? Now this is the sinography. This is very useful if you're planning surgical treatment, okay? Through the sinus, okay? Through the sinus, you have to inject a radio-opaque substance, okay? Then you take the X-ray. And why it will help you is, during the surgical debridement, it will help you to completely excise the bone and also the soft tissue. Okay, if you do not do this, you just go and incise the skin, you can see the dead bone, okay, you can differentiate it and you remove it. But the soft tissue is very difficult to remove. So if you do a sinogram, it will track, okay, and you can remove not only the dead piece of bone, but also the scarred soft tissue, which is forming the sinus, okay? So complete removal. So sinography is important. So this is one method. The other method is, what you do is, if you are planning surgery tomorrow, 24 hours ahead, you take a methylene blue agent and inject it into the sinus and leave it there for 24 hours. So next day, when you take to the OT and you incise, you'll see from the sinus, the track is going to the bone, and you excise in block if you can. Bone plus the soft tissue, which has the sinus tract, okay? You can use this, or you can use, which is more practical, which you do is take a methylene blue and inject into the sinus. And that will help you to debride, okay? So CT scan is also one investigation, and you can see very well the sequestrum in the CT scan. The other is the MRI, as we discussed, both for the bone and for the soft tissue infection. And in MRI, you can see a rim sign, okay? MRI may reveal a well-defined rim of high signal intensity surrounding the focus of active disease, and that is known as the rim sign. So differential diagnosis, okay? Very important. Tubercular osteomyelitis and Ewing sarcoma, okay? Sometimes you're just thinking that this is chronic osteomyelitis or osteomyelitis you're treating. If it comes out Ewing sarcoma, so that's why when you do a surgical debridement, take the patient to the operation theater, you have to send for the microbiology, samples for the microbiology and for the histopathology, okay? So always keep this in mind. Ewing sarcoma, it's a very deadly disease, okay, affecting the diaphysis. And the other is the tubercular osteomyelitis. Tubercular osteomyelitis, it has a very indolent type of cause, okay, very indolent. You may have you will not have a purulent discharge, you'll have a watery discharge, okay? And when you take the bone and give it to the histopathology, if they see the Cages granuloma, they will report to you that this is a tubercular osteomyelitis. Then you have to give the ATT, okay? If you give antibiotics, other antibiotics like this cephalosporin, Vanco, this will not work in this case. You have to give rifampicin, okay? Not only rifampicin, but the HRZE, isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide, ethambutol, okay? And follow the guidelines given by this National Tuberculosis Center for extrapulmonary tuberculosis, okay? And the main drug to give in this is the rifampicin, okay? So treatment is antibiotics, local treatment, and surgery. So antibiotics seldom treat the disease, okay? What can you do then? You can just suppress or prevent the spread, okay? And control the acute flares, okay? To remove the disease, you have to remove the dead piece of bone. Even though that you do that, still you may not be completely able to remove the disease, okay? Or the infective organism. And the antibiotics must be able to penetrate sclerotic tissues, okay? And the antibiotics with that property is fusidic acid, clindamycin, cephalosporin, okay? And vancomycin is used in case of methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, okay? And these antibiotics are used for a long time, okay? For 4 to 6 weeks, IV. And local treatment may just bring an IND and dressing, okay? And as we discussed in Sydney-Madder classification, the class C host, you may just do the incision and drainage, okay? If the pus or cerebroperoneal fluid is coming out, you may just incise a bit and remove the dead tissue around there, okay? But you do not go very deep, okay? So this is good enough for the Sydney-Madder classification type class C host, okay? Regular dressing and incision drainage, okay? Now the main operation, the treatment is the cectostomy. You have to remove the dead piece of bone, okay? And how much to remove, okay? So you remove the dead piece of bone and it has to bleed until the dead piece of bone will not bleed, okay? You just remove the whitish dense bone, and where to stop, you just take out the bone little by little, and where it bleeds, you stop, okay? That is one technique. The other is the paprika sign, means you take a drill and you drill the bone, okay? And when you make small drill holes, it should bleed. If it is not bleeding, there's a dead piece of bone and you need to remove it, okay? If you do not remove it, your treatment is incomplete, okay? And this debridement is not a one-shot debridement. You do today and you have to again wait for 3-4 days, again take to the OT, again see, okay? You have to take in 3-4 days, maybe 3-4 times, okay? It's not a one-shot operation. And antibiotics, you have to keep the antibiotics under coverage of the antibiotics coverage to the patient, okay? So yesterday, somebody was asking about this gentamicin beads. Yeah, once you, now what you do is the dead piece of bone, you may remove en bloc, or if it's a small piece, you can just remove it and they will result in a cavity. Okay, that dead space, you cannot leave like that, okay? Otherwise, again, there'll be a collection. So to obliterate the dead space and also get control of the infection around that area, we put this gentamicin beads, okay? These are bone cements, okay? Polymethyl methacrylate, and this comes plain or it is impregnated with gentamicin, okay? And you can add on other antibiotics, which are heat level antibiotics. We usually use vancomycin, okay? To this, we also add vancomycin, make small beads, okay? Make them beads and put them on the thread, the suture, so that when you remove, all it has to come in one block, okay? You do not remove one by one, okay? You just remove, just take hold of the bead and you should come all at once because it is connected by thread, okay? So this is the bead and this is the thread, okay? So you keep this in this cavity and this will act there, and this bead slowly they will disperse the antibiotics and there will be the local effect of the antibiotic, okay? So this antibiotic beads, you can, bone cement, you can make the beads or you can put en bloc. You can mold it to the shape of the bone and keep it there. Suppose you have removed a large piece of bone, okay? Then you can make the shape of the bone and you can keep it. It acts as a spacer to obliterate the dead space, okay? I'll show you one case which we did, okay? Where there we did not make this antibiotic beads. We made a spacer, okay? With the shape of the bone, and we kept in that space where the bone was removed, okay? And these are kept maybe 2 weeks, 4 weeks, it depends, okay? In the upper limb, we usually keep in the hand and this forearm, upper arm, we usually keep for 2 to 4 weeks, and lower limbs, we can even keep for more time, okay? The concept is that if you keep for a long time, the antibiotics will already have dispersed, and this in fact also will act as a foreign body. So you don't have to keep beyond the required time, okay? So there's another technique which you have to know. That's the Papineau technique, okay? Papineau, Papineau technique. In this, what you do is, first you debride, okay, remove the dead piece of bone, and you have to do a saucerization, okay? Why this saucerization is done is so that it does not, like, if it's a cavity, it will just accumulate the pus or the cerebroperoneal fluid. So if you make a saucer shape, it will percolate down. So that's the concept of saucerization, okay? Then you just then leave it like that. Then there's the granulation tissue formation, Okay. Then in the next OT, you go and put the cancellous bone graft. Okay. First you remove it and make the shape of a saucer. Then the next OT, maybe after 3-4 days, you take, by that time there'll be some granulation tissue in the bed, and then you take the cancellous bone, okay, from the iliac crest, make small chips of bone and keep it in the dead space, okay. And on another setting, what you do is you cover the saw with the soft tissue. So they are the stages, okay. So know this technique, Papineau technique, and know what is saucerization and why it's done, okay. So there's another technique known as the Lautenbach method. This is not done usually, okay. In this is actually a closed irrigation or suction drain. I have not put a photo here. It is there in your book, okay. Just have a look at it. First, what you do is radical excision of all avascular tissue. Then is a closed irrigation suction drainage, okay. So from one end, you give the antibiotics with the fluid, and the other end, that comes out, okay. So, and once you put this antibiotic solution in the bone, it has to be there for at least 3 to 4 hours. After that, you open it and it has to drain, okay. And how long to keep is, you have to keep this as long as you get 3 negative samples, okay, on tissue in culture and sensitivity. Now you put the antibiotic fluid inside this bone, leave it there for 4 hours, then you drain it, okay. So this is done maybe 3 to 4 times a day, and later on you take out this fluid which comes out from the bone, you subject it to culture and sensitivity. You have to get 3 samples negative, then you remove the drainage system, okay. So this is not practiced nowadays, okay. But just know the name, Lautenbach method, and it's given in a book in Maheshwari. The figure is there, okay. So refractory cases. So some patient gets all right, again coming back again and again, maybe in 3-4 months. So what you do is you just remove the whole bone, a large chunk of bone, okay. Excise the non-viable segment of the bone and close the gap by Ilzerov method of transporting viable segment from diastasis. What you do is, now suppose if you take an example of tibia, okay, maybe the mid shaft, maybe around 4 to 5 centimeters of bone is there. You just remove the whole 5 centimeter of bone. Now there's a gap, okay. Now what you do is that you have 2 options for the gap. You leave the gap just like that, put the Ilzerov, okay, and later do a bone transport from the distal side metaphysis where it's not infected. You do a corticectomy and you transport the bone, okay, and the gap will close. The bone gap will close. That is one method. That is known as bone transport. The other is when you remove the bone, you can approximate the cut ends, but what will happen? The leg will be short, okay, and then later you can do a bone lengthening, applying the Ilzerov itself, okay. So if there's a bone gap, you can treat by 2 methods. You have to apply Ilzerov. You can either do bone transport or do a bone lengthening, okay. So what we did, the case which I showed you that time, the humerus, the chronic osteomyelitis of the humerus, what we did is we removed the dead piece of bone. I think that was around 3 to 4 centimeter, okay. We removed it and we applied the Ilzerov, and we did not consider doing bone transport or bone lengthening, because in the humerus, even though your upper arm is short, only you will know. The others will not realize, okay. It's not like in the limb, where if your limb is short, you will walk with a lurch and everyone will notice. But in the upper arm, except the patient, others will not know that whether one arm is short or not. So in this, what we did, we just remove the bone, the dead piece of bone, and the healthy bone, we approximate it, okay, and put a Ilzerov, okay. And finally, it healed, okay. So the other problem is the soft tissue cover. You can do a skin graft, or you can do a local myocutaneous skin graft, or you can have a free vascularized flap, okay. So not only doing procedure to the bone is important, but also the soft tissue cover. Okay. Suppose the skin is all scarred, this sinus, you have removed the skin. Now later you have to cover it. Okay. But this you have to take help of a plastic surgeon. Okay. So now we come to Gary's osteomyelitis. What is it? Okay. It is a sclerosing and non-suppurative chronic osteomyelitis. Occurs typically in the mandible. Pyrexia and pain subside, but osseous enlargement persists. And this also should be differentiated, okay, from bone tumors, okay, like Ewing's and osteosarcoma. Note this, okay, this is a sclerosing non-suppurative, okay, no pus, non-suppurative osteomyelitis, okay, and it should also be distinguished from this osteoid osteoma and Paget's disease. Treatment is rest and broad spectrum antibiotics, okay. So what are the complications? So this chronic osteomyelitis, okay, they can have repeated acute exacerbations, okay. Even though when you treat and the patient is symptomatically better, okay, you look at the patient, he is very fit and fine, looking well, but we have done a surgical intervention and we may not be able to completely eradicate the bacteria or infective organism, okay. So you will have acute exacerbation time and again, acute on chronic, okay. So what we say is chronic if the patient has chronic osteomyelitis, and we say to the patient, once your bone has been infected, it is infected forever, okay. You don't know when it will give you again trouble, maybe next 15 years, maybe next 20 years, but it can again give you a problem, okay. It is very different. This infection, bone infection, is very different from the soft tissue, okay. Soft tissue, if you just excise the soft tissue, you give antibiotics, the patient is okay. But once the bone is infected, it's very, very difficult to completely remove the infection from the bone, okay. And there'll be growth abnormalities, especially in children, okay, when the infection goes towards the physis, okay. So there could be growth abnormalities, and the diseased bone is weak, so you can have pathological fractures, okay. And since the patient will have pain, okay, not mobilizing his limbs, it could lead to joint stiffness, okay. And this sinus tract malignancy, though it's rare, could occur, because if the patient does not come, if patient has a sinus and he does not turn up for treatment for a long time, maybe he's just staying like that for years, so that could turn into a malignancy, okay. Okay, I'll show you a case, I think, which we did 2 years back, okay. So sometimes it is that difficult to treat the case, okay. So this lady presented to us, okay, in this condition. She had an open fracture of radius, okay. This is just the volar aspect, but it was open on the dorsal side, okay. So all the skin is about to get necrosed, okay. So what we did was, so as part of damage control, we just put an external fixator, fixing the radius, and the plastic did a flap, okay. This is a flap. In about a week's time, all this turned black, okay, and we had to remove it. And once it removed, there's just muscles, so you had to cover it. And first, the plastic did a flap, okay. This is a muscular flap, free muscular flap, okay. Then we did, once the wound was cleared, the soft tissue was very good, we did remove the external fixator and we did a plating with the DCP, okay. This is a picture or x-ray, not just after immediate post-op, but after 7 months, okay. We discharged the patient and she came back after 7 months, okay. So she had also a spinal injury and she was paraplegic, and we had sent her to spinal injury rehab center in Sangha in Bonepa, and she had a discharging sinus, but she did not turn up until 7 months, okay. So when she came back in 7 months, we could see the periosteal reaction, okay? And so this has already resulted in chronic osteomyelitis, and she had a discharging sinus. So what we did is, the first thing was to remove the plate, okay? No matter how good antibiotics you give, the organisms in the plate, remaining in the plate, the DCP will form a biofilm and cannot reach there. So you have to remove the plate, okay? So once we remove the plate, now look at the difference. This is the living bone, okay? And this is the white, okay, sclerotic dead piece of bone, okay? Look at the difference. This is the living bone, this is the dead bone, okay? And what we did was, we removed it. And when we removed it, it was 7 centimeter, okay? So we removed 7 centimeter of the radial shaft, okay? But subsequently, what happened was, we took her repeatedly to the OT, okay? So initially 7 centimeter, and maybe in 3-4 days, we removed some of the bone, and we took her to the OT 3 or 4 times. And by the time we took her maybe 4-5 times, we had removed a large piece of bone. It was 11 centimeter of bone was removed, and still the infection was not controlled, okay? So this is the distal portion of the radius, and this is the proximal portion of the radius. What you see in between here is not the bone, it is the cement, bone cement, okay? And this is a spacer. So that earlier I told you, when you put the bone cement, you can either make the beads, or you can make the shape of a bone and keep it as a spacer to get control of the infection locally. So this is a cement, okay? From here to here is the cement. You can just see the gap here and here. This is the bone cement with vancomycin, okay? Even we did this much, remove so much portion of the bone, now hardly radius remaining, just a small portion of distal and proximal radius remaining. Still the infection is not controlled. If you look at this picture, this is the bone cement. Now again, look here. This is the periosteal reaction. Still the infection not controlled. Okay, we gave a very good antibiotics, trials of antibiotics. Still the infection was not resolved. Okay, and if you look at the proximal portion also, look, the periosteal reaction has started. So she stayed in hospital for months, maybe 7 to 8 months, just for this. Okay, and ultimately, what we did was, actually we had this long piece of bone, this was gone. So we had some plans, okay, to remove this spacer, the bone cement, and fill up this with cancellous pieces of bone, okay, from the iliac crest, and also put some artificial bone known as the G bone, and then do a plating. But in her case, it did not work, okay, it was not going to work. So what we ultimately did was, we removed the bone cement, okay, and look, there's a gap here. This is the proximal distal. Okay, student, this is the last slide, and just the time was up. I'll just explain you about this, okay, because it's quite interesting. So ultimately, what we had to do, so this just, I put this case to just to remind you all that it's very difficult to treat chronic osteomyelitis, okay. Ultimately, what you do is, we had to remove the bone, okay, and we used so many antibiotics, it did not work, and only one antibiotic which worked was the rifampicin, ultimately. Though it was not a case of tuberculous osteomyelitis, rifampicin did the job, okay. And using rifampicin, the infection was controlled, and since she had stayed long in the hospital, the patient was fed up, the patient party was fed up, we also very frustrated, and ultimately what we did is, we converted this forearm to a single bone forearm. The distal portion of the radius and the ulna, the radio-ulnar joint was fused, okay, and making it a single bone forearm. So she does not have the mid part of the radius, and this has fused, and now it has been converted into a single bone forearm. This is also a one form of treatment. Okay. So, and ultimately this infection was controlled, and now she's doing well. She came for follow-up, I think 2 months back, during the lockdown time, 2 months back, and she's doing well. Okay. So I think, dear students, with this we end this class, and the osteomyelitis is an important topic. Read it well. You'll have definitely questions, okay, in the exam from osteomyelitis. Chat box ma ta okay, if you have questions, you can ask questions. I'll be here for 5 minutes, okay? So somebody just asked about the saucerization. Saucerization is done. Now, if it's a cavity, it will accumulate. So you just chop off the ends of the cavity so that whatever is collected just percolates out. Okay. The concept is to obliterate the dead space and not let this pus or the cerebral substance or exudates to accumulate. Okay. No. Okay. You cannot do that. Supination, pronation is difficult. Okay. So you have to fix the bone in mid-prone position. There will be a little bit of supination and pronation, but it's not a useful supination pronation. Okay. So you have to, while fusing the distal radial ulnar joint, you have to fuse in the mid-prone position, the functional position. Okay. And in this patient, she was this is the right hand, but luckily she was a left-handed person. Okay. And she's in a wheelchair, but she is able to push her wheelchair, but luckily she's a left-handed person, so she does everything with the left hand. Okay. She has very little function with the right hand. This I didn't get the last question. Somebody asking about this available of artificial implants. Artificial implants means the artificial prosthesis. I think orthosis or prosthesis. Okay. So nowadays the orthosis. Okay. Orthosis, artificial limbs have come up. Okay. For the low limb is very good. Okay. We have seen patient who have got amputation from the thigh. Okay. Putting this very good artificial legs, which is known as this orthosis. Okay. Orthosis. And they're going for the Olympic Games also. Okay. But in the upper limb is not that much development, and in our part of the country, patient cannot afford it. Okay. It's very, very difficult. Okay. So are there any more questions, or I think we'll end the class. Okay.